Chris, let's get right to it. First, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Amanda. Hope you guys had a great weekend.
Yep, we're good. Go to LandryFootball.com if you want the insight and you want to learn more than any of your fans know about football. So I know you're not a gambling guy. That's not something you cover on your site. You cover the X's and O's and the things that I really like, personnel and stuff like that. So, but you do have your finger on the pulse enough to know what a 5.5 point spread is. And I thought Tennessee favored over Florida by 5.5, which was released by DraftKings yesterday. And part of that's to get attention, Chris. We know that. The game hasn't even, they haven't even played games before.
No, it's not.
I think a little of it's to get attention. But anyway, nevertheless, 5.5 points. Tennessee, a 5.5 point favorite, almost a touchdown.
Well, as you guys both know, and talking with a lot of people in the gambling world that involved in making lines, the goal is to get equal amount of money on both sides.
Right.
So it's about anticipating where the betting public thinks the favorite is, and that often coincides with how maybe people in Vegas think, but they're thinking in terms of the market really is like the stock market. How do you think people are going to respond to it? It's no one really knows, and I would say this that there's a perception, right or wrong. Tennessee off of a good year, second year of a coach, a lot of unknowns with Florida, so there's not as much. Let Florida come out and be really impressive, then that line could change based upon, people are going to think, well, Florida's better than we thought, or they're not as good as we thought, whatever the case may be. But so I don't really look at it a whole lot in terms of what it really means. We all know home field, all that stuff is factored into it, but I don't really, and one of the things I do in Landry football is I do break down the games each week, and I look at it and I grade it and I give kind of an idea how I think it is. So, I mean, I know I've heard a lot of people say, well, I like to use it for my gambling, but I do it based upon how it looks this week, how teams are playing, who's healthy, those things. What is intriguing about this, the gamblers will tell you, because I know some people that do this, they feel like they have an edge by making a bet now in August on a game in November because they really feel like they know better than most of the betting public on who's better. However, there's a risk with it. God forbid the starting quarterback on Team A or Team B goes down. All of a sudden, you just put your money in August on something that you look back and, mid-September and you say, boy, I wouldn't have done that if I'd known that. So that's the thing about it is that's why it's called gambling, right? And that's why the buildings are so big in Vegas.
Yeah, I can give you a recent example. I mean, Alabama, I believe, still wins the national title if they don't lose the two of the most talented wide receivers in the nation last year. If they don't have injuries in the running back room, I still think they win it all. I know Amanda wants to jump in there as well, but I'll just ask you today's tough question. And if people want to take part, feel free to give us some questions for Chris on our chat board. But our question was simple. It was 5.5. Is that too low, just right, or too high? Just looking at personnel. And if you even want to make this at a neutral site, Chris, who would you favor in this game? Let's say
I think I'll say this. It would be closer than 5 points. To me, it would be maybe a 2 point right now. If I had to bet it, which I would not do for the reasons that I mentioned, no, I think it's closer than that. I think it's a toss-up game, which 5.5 is a little high for me. I mean, if you told me I had to put $5 down on it one way or the other today, I'd just say, well, I'm going to put 5 on Florida and get 5.5 points, just because that's a lot of Now again, it's $5, so if it turns out that Florida's not quite as good and uh, Richardson's injured, whatever, then obviously that $5 is not well spent. But
fair enough. Amanda, I know you want to jump in there. Go right ahead. And if people have questions about Chris and their favorite team, you can get on board now because I want to ask you about the Cowboys here in a second. All right, go, Amanda.
So I know what's crazy is after looking at the odds of the Florida Tennessee game, I also looked at the odds of, they had DraftKings had odds for Tennessee, Georgia, and Tennessee, Alabama. They actually have Georgia favored by more against Tennessee than they have Alabama favored against Tennessee, which I thought
Say
was
that
very
again.
weird.
They have Georgia favored by how much?
Yeah.
What would they have?
I think Georgia's favored 15.5 and Alabama's favored 13 over Tennessee.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Found that very
And
strange.
yeah, that is interesting. No,
I don't
it
believe
didn't hear.
Georgia's going to be that good. I just don't.
Well, it'll be interesting to see that line is intriguing to me. I would have said, not really, and not being an odds maker, I would have put it at maybe 15-18, favorite for both Georgia and Alabama, but pretty much equal. Not. I mean, the fact that and refresh me. Hey, this may be the answer. Where is the? I should know this. Where is the Georgia Tennessee game? That is
The
at,
Alabama
at
game. The Alabama game is in Knoxville, and the Georgia
that's
game is in
that's it.
Asheville.
That's the answer. That's
Yeah.
the answer right there. So
Yeah.
Georgia's on the road. So that's the answer. So it's really maybe a what would you say, a point. Alabama would be on a neutral site, maybe a point more favored over Tennessee than Georgia. So that makes sense. It's the home field, and I didn't know off the hand that's it. I think
Yeah.
that's about right, to be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, again, I just finished saying predicting. I just think that Georgia, talent wise, is on a different level than Tennessee, and I would probably say two touchdowns is about what it would be in terms of personnel wise going into the season. Now, again, how it looks on the week of before November 5th, well, if I do well enough, hopefully I'll be back in the week of November 5th to tell you how I feel about that game. But right now, that's kind of how I would see it. I think the SEC East is Georgia, and then there's a gap, a quite a sizable gap. And then and that's why when people say, who's going to finish second? I think Georgia's on a different level, and Georgia's kind of what Alabama is approaching where Alabama's been. Yeah, their level of, well, they're not as good as last year is kind of like Alabama. Well, they're a little bit better this year than they were last year, and they weren't as good last year as they were the year before. That's kind of where Georgia is. They just reload. The talent level on defense, they lost all those players to the NFL. They're not going to be as good as they were last year. They don't need to be. They're not playing last year's team. They're going to be really good. I think they're one of the 4 or 5 best teams in the country without a doubt in my mind. And I think that only Alabama and Georgia fit that category in the SEC.